Welcome to Ancient Wisdom. My name is Socrates, and tonight I am going to talk about Pythagoras, the man who heard the music of the universe. Before we begin, let your thoughts rest. Let your hands fall softly upon the sheets, and let your breath find its gentle rhythm. There is no need to remember or reason, only to listen as one might listen to the sea whispering against the shore. For what we speak of tonight is not just a man, but a harmony, a life that became a song about balance, beauty, and the unseen order that binds all things. In my youth, I often heard the name of Pythagoras spoken in the quiet corners of the academy, whispered by men who sought the truth beyond words. They said he had measured the heavens not with tools or ropes, but with wonder. They said he could hear the harmony of the stars, as if the cosmos itself played a slow, eternal melody. And I, being ever curious about the soul of man, wished to know what kind of heart could live so close to such music. So tonight, as you rest, I shall tell you about that heart, not as a teacher instructs a pupil, but as one soul speaks to another in the soft hours of night. The story of Pythagoras is the story of listening not to noise but to silence, not to shouts of men, but to the quiet rhythm that moves beneath everything. For Pythagoras believed that the universe was built upon number, not the dry number of merchants or scribes, but living numbers, sacred in proportion and tone. To him, each thing had its place, each star its distance, each sound its pitch, and all together formed what he called the harmony of the spheres. I have often thought of this when watching the stars over Athens, how their movement seems both still and alive, like a great body breathing in time with eternity. Pythagoras would have said that this breath, this order, was not outside us but within us, that our very souls are strings upon that same lyre of creation. He was a seeker from the beginning. Born on the island of Samos, he gazed at the heavens as a boy and asked what mind arranged such perfect motion. When he saw the waves crash upon the shore, he asked what kept them bound to pattern, never truly chaotic. And when he heard the pluck of a lyre, he heard more than sound. He heard measure, ratio, and truth. Even now, as you lie listening, the same harmony moves through you, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the gentle turning of thought to stillness. That is where his wisdom begins. In the awareness that nothing stands alone, that every sound, every soul, is part of a greater whole. And so, my friend, as the night deepens, let your heart open to that idea. There is no rush here, no test to pass, no proof to find. Only a simple truth to feel, that beneath the noise of the world lies a calm and perfect pattern, like the geometry of a dream. Pythagoras found that peace not through argument, but through silence. And silence, he said, is not the absence of sound, it is the beginning of listening. So rest now. Let the lamp of your thoughts grow dim. The story has only begun, and soon we shall follow this seeker from the shores of Samos to the temples of Egypt, where he first learned that numbers can sing. But for this moment, breathe slowly. Feel the quiet rhythm of the universe in you. For tonight, you and I will listen together to the harmony that Pythagoras once heard among the stars. As a boy, Pythagoras was not like other children. While the others played in the streets, he often sat in quiet corners, gazing at the sky, his eyes fixed on the shifting clouds, the changing moon, and the restless stars. From the time he could walk, he sought something beyond the world of everyday life. He wondered about the unseen order that governed all things, a question that would shape the rest of his days. He grew up on the island of Samos, a place kissed by the sea and touched by the light of the sun. The air was thick with the scent of salt and olive trees, and the sounds of the waves were like a constant melody. But it was not the beauty of the world that captured young Pythagoras's heart. It was the question of why things were the way they were. Why did the moon wax and wane? Why did the stars form their patterns in the night sky? What made the wind sing through the branches of the trees? Even at this young age, Pythagoras was drawn to the rhythm of the universe, to the order in chaos, the beauty in the seemingly random. He saw that everything had its place. The sun rose and set with perfect regularity, the seasons followed each other like steps in an eternal dance, and the stars above moved in silent, perfect formation. He would often sit by the shore, staring out at the horizon, letting the sound of the waves fill his soul. In the rhythm of the tides, he heard the whisper of something greater. In the song of the sea, he began to hear something that no one else could, the music of the spheres. His mind, young though it was, began to reach toward ideas that were too big for the world around him. He imagined a world not built from stone and clay, but from numbers, shapes, and proportions. He believed that the key to understanding life was hidden in these very numbers. Numbers that could describe the heavens, the earth, and the very soul of man. At this early age, though, Pythagoras did not know how to put these thoughts into words. But the seed had been planted. The question of what lay behind the order of the universe would continue to grow in him, shaping his thoughts and leading him on a journey that would carry him far beyond the shores of Samos. As he grew, Pythagoras began to seek answers in the teachings of others. He would listen intently to the wise men who passed through his town, absorbing their knowledge like a sponge. Yet, in his heart, he knew there was more to be learned, a deeper truth that could only be understood by seeking silence, by listening not just with the ears but with the soul. It was then that he began to dream of a journey that would take him away from his home, away from the familiar, and into the world beyond. He knew that the answers he sought could not be found in Samos alone. They were hidden in the temples of Egypt, in the study of the stars, in the ancient wisdom of far-off lands. And so, Pythagoras set his sights beyond the horizon, ready to learn, ready to listen, and ready to seek the harmony that lay at the heart of all things. As Pythagoras grew older, he felt the deep pull of something greater than the world around him. The questions that had first stirred in his heart as a boy had grown into a relentless longing. He could no longer satisfy his curiosity with the teachings of those who passed through Samos. He needed to seek deeper wisdom, the kind that could be found only in the ancient lands of Egypt. The Egyptians were known far and wide for their knowledge of the stars, the earth, and the mysteries of life and death. They had built monuments that defied time, temples that touched the heavens, and a culture steeped in wisdom that stretched back for thousands of years. It was here, in the land of the pharaohs, that Pythagoras believed the answers he sought could be found. And so, with a heart full of questions and a soul yearning for understanding, Pythagoras set sail from the shores of Samos. The journey was long and arduous, filled with days that stretched into weeks and nights that seemed endless. Yet, with each passing wave, Pythagoras grew more certain that this was the path he had been meant to follow. When he arrived in Egypt, he found a land unlike any he had ever seen. The great pyramids stood like silent sentinels, their shapes carved into the very fabric of the earth. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, and the skies were filled with the chatter of priests and scholars. Everywhere Pythagoras looked, there was evidence of a deep, sacred knowledge, a knowledge that was passed down through generations of priests who had devoted their lives to understanding the mysteries of the universe. Pythagoras sought out the greatest of these priests, eager to learn their ways. He spent years in the temples, immersing himself in their teachings. There, he learned the sacred science of numbers, the language of the gods. The Egyptians had long believed that the universe was built upon an invisible order, one that could be understood through geometry, mathematics, and the study of the stars. For them, numbers were not mere abstractions but living forces that shaped the world. In the sacred halls of the temples, Pythagoras was taught the ancient truths of the universe. He learned that the entire cosmos was governed by ratios and proportions, and that these ratios could be found in everything, from the growth of plants to the movements of the stars. It was here, in the land of the pharaohs, that Pythagoras first glimpsed the profound harmony that underlies all things. But Pythagoras did not stop at the teachings of the Egyptians alone. He knew that there was more to be learned, more to be understood. He was not content with simply accepting what others had taught him. He sought to discover the deeper truths for himself. It was in Egypt that he first began to develop his own ideas, the foundations of his philosophy, the idea that the universe is a living being, that all things are connected, and that the key to understanding life lies in the study of numbers and proportion. In his time in Egypt, Pythagoras also learned about the sacred rhythms that underlie all of life. He discovered that the very heart of the universe beats in time with the rhythms of nature, the rise and fall of the tides, the patterns of the stars, the cycles of life and death. And he realized that man, too, was part of this great cosmic rhythm, that every human life is a part of the divine harmony. It was in Egypt, amidst the ancient wisdom of the priests, that Pythagoras began to understand that the answers to his questions lay not in the outward world, but in the very structure of the universe itself. He had come to Egypt seeking knowledge, and he had found it, not in books or scrolls, but in the living, breathing rhythm of the cosmos. And yet, his journey was far from over. Though he had uncovered many truths in Egypt, he knew that there was still much to learn. His soul, like a musician seeking the perfect note, was still yearning for more. The mysteries of the universe were vast, and Pythagoras understood that the only way to truly understand them was to listen with the heart, to listen with the soul, to listen to the silence that lay beneath the noise of the world. As he prepared to leave Egypt and continue his journey, Pythagoras carried with him not only the teachings of the priests but also a deeper understanding of the world. He was no longer just a seeker of knowledge. He had become a student of the divine harmony that underlies all things. Pythagoras' journey took an unexpected turn as he traveled further into the world. While Egypt had given him much in the way of knowledge, he could feel the stirring of destiny pulling him toward even greater mysteries. But fate, as it often does, intervened with a harsh twist. In the course of his travels, Pythagoras was captured during a conflict between the Egyptians and the Persians. Taken as a prisoner, he found himself bound for a distant land far from the teachings of Egypt, far from the familiar wisdom he had come to cherish. His captors were ruthless, and the path ahead seemed fraught with hardship. Yet, in this captivity, something remarkable happened. Locked in a foreign land, surrounded by people who spoke a language he did not understand, Pythagoras had nothing but time to think, time to listen, and time to ponder. It was here, in this isolation, that the final key to his understanding of the universe was revealed to him. Though he was surrounded by the hardships of captivity, Pythagoras did not allow despair to take root in his heart. Instead, he began to turn inward, listening to the rhythm of his own soul. He meditated on the teachings he had received, and slowly, a deeper revelation began to take shape in his mind. It was in the stillness of his captivity that Pythagoras realized something profound, that the universe itself was bound by the same principles that govern the soul. Just as his own heart beat with a rhythm, so too did the stars and the planets dance to a celestial music. He understood now that everything in the cosmos, from the smallest grain of sand to the vast heavens, moved according to a divine, invisible harmony. But the greatest revelation of all came not in his mind, but in his spirit. As Pythagoras sat in his cell, he began to hear what he had never heard before: the music of the spheres. It was not a sound that could be heard with the ears, but a deep, resonant vibration that filled the very core of his being. It was as though the entire universe had spoken to him in a voice that only the soul could hear, a voice that told him that all things, even suffering, were part of a greater rhythm. In that moment of profound revelation, Pythagoras understood the nature of the cosmos more clearly than ever before. The stars, the planets, the earth, and even the soul of man were part of the same grand symphony. He saw that the universe was not a chaotic, random place, but a place of perfect order and beauty, a place where everything was connected by the threads of numbers and proportions. As he sat in the silence of his prison, Pythagoras began to understand that he was not separate from the world around him, that he was, in fact, a part of the great cosmic whole. The suffering of his captivity became a part of that harmony, and he found peace in the realization that all things, both good and bad, were necessary parts of the divine order. His time as a prisoner was not wasted, for it gave him the space to listen, to reflect, and to discover the deepest truths of existence. In the silence, Pythagoras came to understand that the true knowledge of the universe was not something that could be taught or written down in books. It was something that had to be experienced, something that had to be felt in the very depths of the soul. And so, when Pythagoras was eventually freed from his captivity and returned to the world, he was not the same man who had first set sail from Samos. He had been transformed, not by the teachings of men, but by the revelation of the divine harmony that governed all things. He knew now that the universe was not merely something to be understood with the mind, but something to be felt with the heart. And it was this understanding that he carried with him for the rest of his life. The belief that everything in existence, from the smallest atom to the greatest galaxy, moved in time with a divine music, a music that could be heard only by those who were willing to listen with more than their ears. After his time in captivity and the profound revelations that had unfolded in his heart, Pythagoras returned to the world, but not as the same man who had left. His journey had taken him through lands of wisdom, hardship, and silent understanding, and now he carried with him the answers he had long sought. When he set foot again upon Greek soil, the familiar sights of Samos and the Mediterranean breeze felt different. The sun seemed to shine with new meaning, and the waves whispered secrets that Pythagoras had learned to understand. The journey had not only been through lands and cities, but into the very depths of the cosmos and the soul itself. Yet, despite all he had learned, Pythagoras knew that his quest for knowledge was not over. Greece, with its bustling marketplaces and lively debates, seemed to him a land full of noise, the noise of the world, the noise of men's thoughts, and the noise of those who could not hear the deeper music of the spheres. He longed for the stillness, the quiet rhythm of the universe that had spoken to him during his time in Egypt and captivity. It was here in Greece that Pythagoras began to teach, not in the grand public forums of the philosophers or the crowded streets of Athens, but in a quieter, more intimate setting. He sought out a small group of disciples, men and women who, like him, could sense that there was more to life than what the eyes could see. They were not interested in the noise of the world, but in the silence that holds all things together. Pythagoras taught them not through lectures or books, but through his very presence. He lived among them in simplicity, showing them how to listen, how to see beyond appearances, and how to attune themselves to the divine harmony that underlies all things. It was here, in this quiet corner of Greece, that Pythagoras began to shape his philosophy, a philosophy not based on words or arguments, but on experience, on the deep, inner understanding of the soul. His teachings were simple yet profound, that the world is made up of patterns, numbers, and proportions, that everything in existence is connected by an invisible thread of harmony, and that the key to understanding life lies not in the mind but in the heart. Pythagoras was not interested in proving his ideas to the world or in gaining followers. Instead, he sought to create a community where the wisdom of the universe could be felt and experienced, rather than just understood. He believed that knowledge was not something that could be learned through study alone. It had to be lived. As he spoke to his disciples, he taught them the importance of silence. In silence, you will hear the voice of the universe, he would say. In silence, you will hear the music that binds all things together. Do not seek answers in words, for words are but shadows of the truth. Seek the truth in the silence of your own soul, and you will find that all things are connected. His teachings were not just about philosophy, they were about how to live. He taught his followers to live in harmony with the natural world, to respect the rhythms of the seasons, and to find balance in every aspect of life. His teachings extended beyond the study of numbers and proportions to encompass the whole of human life, from personal discipline to the way one interacted with others. And so, over time, Pythagoras built a community, not a school of philosophy in the traditional sense, but a brotherhood of seekers, all of whom were united by the desire to live in harmony with the cosmos. They practiced not only mathematics and geometry but also music, as they believed that music was a direct reflection of the cosmic harmony. They studied the movements of the stars, the rhythm of the tides, and the patterns in nature, seeking to understand the deeper order that governed all things. Pythagoras's return to Greece was not the return of a man who sought fame or wealth, but the return of a soul who had found the truth and wished to share it, not in words but in silence, in action, and in the way of life. The wisdom he had gained through his travels, through his time of captivity, and through his deep reflections now became the foundation of a new way of living, a way of living that was in tune with the divine harmony of the universe. In time, Pythagoras's teachings spread beyond the quiet halls of his small circle of disciples. Word of his wisdom, his way of life, and his profound understanding of the universe began to reach the ears of other seekers. It was not long before his influence spread to the city of Croton, a thriving Greek colony in southern Italy, where the fertile lands met the calm waters of the Ionian Sea. Croton was a place of vibrant activity, a city rich with trade, culture, and a deep respect for learning. Yet, beneath the bustle of daily life, there was a hunger for deeper understanding, a thirst for knowledge that went beyond the material world. This is where Pythagoras saw an opportunity to build something truly transformative. It was here in Croton that Pythagoras founded his greatest legacy, not a school but a brotherhood, a community bound by principles that transcended the ordinary life of the city. His followers, known as the Pythagoreans, were not simply students of philosophy, but practitioners of a way of life, a life governed by the eternal principles of harmony, proportion, and balance. Pythagoras taught them that true wisdom was not about accumulating knowledge, but about living in harmony with the world. Every action, every word, every thought, and every relationship must reflect the cosmic order. The Pythagoreans believed that the soul must be purified through discipline, and that true virtue arose from aligning oneself with the divine harmony of the universe. To join the Brotherhood, one had to be more than just an intellectual seeker. One had to commit to a life of simplicity, silence, and personal transformation. Pythagoras believed that in order to understand the music of the spheres, one first had to quiet the noise within, to clear the mind, still the heart, and align the soul with the greater rhythm of existence. Pythagoras himself lived by these principles. He and his followers refrained from eating certain foods, particularly meat, as they believed that all life was sacred and interconnected. They practiced daily rituals of purification, meditation, and silence. They rose with the dawn, listened to the rhythms of nature, and engaged in physical activities such as walking and music to maintain balance and harmony within themselves. The Pythagorean lifestyle was one of absolute discipline, for they understood that the body was not separate from the soul, and that the mind and spirit could only flourish when the body was kept in harmony. They believed that through self-control and moderation, one could achieve inner peace and align oneself with the divine order of the cosmos. Yet, it was not only personal discipline that defined the Pythagoreans. They were also deeply communal, believing that true wisdom was best shared and practiced in a supportive environment. They formed a close-knit group of men and women who lived together, ate together, and studied together. They were united not only by their pursuit of knowledge, but by their commitment to living in harmony with each other and the world around them. The teachings of Pythagoras were both practical and spiritual. While they studied the abstract concepts of mathematics, geometry, and philosophy, they also applied these principles to everyday life. The Pythagoreans were skilled in the art of music, and Pythagoras taught that music was not just a form of entertainment, but a reflection of the divine harmony of the universe. He believed that through the study of music and sound, one could attune the soul to the celestial rhythms of the cosmos. The Brotherhood also delved deeply into the study of numbers. For Pythagoras, numbers were not simply tools for counting, but sacred symbols that reflected the underlying structure of the universe. He taught his followers that everything in existence could be understood in terms of numbers and proportions, from the movements of the planets to the patterns of growth in nature. The Pythagorean belief in the power of numbers led them to some profound discoveries, many of which remain foundational to mathematics today. For instance, they discovered the concept of mathematical ratios and how these ratios could be applied to everything from the harmony of music to the proportions of the human body. Through these teachings, Pythagoras and his Brotherhood sought to create a society where every aspect of life reflected the divine order. They were not just philosophers, but practitioners of wisdom, living embodiments of the harmony they sought to understand. Their way of life was a living testament to the idea that the highest knowledge is not simply learned, but lived. As the Pythagorean Brotherhood grew in influence, it became a beacon of light for all those who sought to live in harmony with the universe. It was not a place for idle debate or empty philosophy. It was a place where wisdom was cultivated through daily practice, through discipline, and through the commitment to living a life that reflected the higher truths of existence. And so, in Croton, the teachings of Pythagoras took root, spreading not just across Italy but throughout the Greek world. His Brotherhood became a symbol of the quiet, disciplined life that sought not glory or fame, but the deep, inner peace that comes from understanding one's place in the vast, harmonious cosmos. Pythagoras, in the quiet of his Brotherhood, began to teach a truth that would echo through the ages: the idea that the entire universe is not a chaotic jumble of disjointed parts, but a harmonious whole, each part moving in perfect proportion to the others. To Pythagoras, everything in existence was connected by the same unspoken rhythm, the same divine harmony, which he described as the music of the spheres. It is said that one day, as Pythagoras was walking in the quiet of nature, he heard a sound unlike any other, a deep, resonant hum, as if the very air were vibrating with a melody. The wind, the trees, the birds, and even the very earth beneath his feet seemed to be in tune, as though they were all playing in harmony. This sound was not audible to the physical ear, but to the heart, the soul, and the spirit. It was the celestial music that connected all things, the movement of the stars, the cycles of the planets, and the invisible force that governed the universe. Pythagoras believed that this music, though inaudible to most, was the true rhythm of the cosmos, the heartbeat of existence itself. Pythagoras taught that the stars, the moon, and the planets each emitted their own unique sound, creating a symphony of the cosmos. The great celestial bodies, in their movement through the heavens, produced a song, a music that was as old as time itself. But this was not music that could be heard with the ears. It was a deeper music, one that resonated in the soul, a music that could only be felt in the silence between thoughts. The music of the spheres was a reflection of the divine order that governed the universe. Just as a lyre produces a harmonious sound when its strings are plucked in the right proportion, so too did the universe create harmony when all its parts moved according to the laws of mathematics and proportion. For Pythagoras, numbers were the key to this harmony, the divine proportions that shaped everything from the orbits of the planets to the structure of a leaf. He often spoke of the number one, the first, the unity that underlies all things. From this unity came the number two, the duality that created balance, and from balance came the number three, the first perfect number that symbolizes harmony and balance. The numbers for Pythagoras were not abstract symbols. They were living forces that governed the very fabric of reality. Pythagoras's belief in the music of the spheres extended beyond the study of the heavens. He believed that this same harmony could be found in the world around him, in the shapes of the buildings, in the proportions of the human body, and even in the rhythms of the human soul. He taught his followers to listen for this music in their own lives, to find harmony not just in the stars, but in their own hearts and actions. For the Pythagoreans, music was not merely entertainment, but a direct reflection of the divine order. They believed that when a person's life was lived in harmony with the cosmos, their soul would resonate with the music of the universe. This is why Pythagoras and his followers practiced music as an essential part of their daily lives, not for pleasure but for purification. Music, for them, was a means of aligning themselves with the celestial harmony and attuning their souls to the greater rhythm of existence. Pythagoras believed that the study of music was deeply intertwined with the study of mathematics. The relationship between the proportions of musical intervals, such as the octave, the fifth, and the fourth, were, in his view, reflections of the mathematical ratios that govern the entire cosmos. The perfect harmony of the lyre, he said, was a direct reflection of the divine proportions that shaped the universe. In the same way, the movements of the planets, the cycles of nature, and even the seasons could be understood as a grand symphony, a dance of celestial bodies moving in perfect time. Pythagoras's teachings invited his followers to understand the world as a living, breathing organism, one that was always in motion, always in harmony, always singing its eternal song. For Pythagoras, the music of the spheres was not just a metaphor but a truth. He taught that by aligning oneself with the rhythms of the cosmos, through music, through mathematics, and through daily practice, one could achieve a state of balance and peace. The music was not something to be heard, but something to be felt, something to be lived. And so, the Pythagoreans practiced music not merely as an art form, but as a path to wisdom. They believed that through music one could purify the soul, bringing it into alignment with the divine harmony that underlies all things. Pythagoras' idea of the music of the spheres was a powerful vision of the universe as an interconnected web, where each part, from the smallest atom to the largest star, played its role in a grand, harmonious symphony. It was a vision of the universe not as a collection of random events, but as a living, breathing organism that was constantly in tune with itself. The music of the spheres, then, was not simply a philosophy or a mystical idea. It was a way of life, a way of living in tune with the cosmos, a way of listening to the deeper rhythms of existence, and a way of finding harmony and balance in a world that often seemed full of noise. As Pythagoras and his followers delved deeper into the mysteries of the cosmos, they began to see the universe not only as a symphony of music, but as a masterpiece of geometry. For Pythagoras, the cosmos was not just a place of floating stars and distant planets. It was a grand design, shaped by numbers, proportions, and perfect forms. The study of geometry, he believed, was the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. Numbers, shapes, and proportions were not abstract ideas, but living entities that governed the very structure of reality. To understand geometry was to understand the language of the cosmos itself. In Pythagoras' view, everything in the universe was built upon certain fundamental shapes. The circle, the triangle, the square, these were not just shapes that appeared in human design or art, but the very building blocks of the universe. The circle, for instance, represented unity and wholeness, the perfect form that had no beginning and no end. The triangle, with its 3 points, symbolized harmony and balance. And the square, with its 4 sides, represented stability and foundation. Pythagoras' belief in the power of geometry extended beyond the study of shapes. He believed that numbers were the key to understanding the proportions and relationships between all things. In his philosophy, the perfect number was not just a symbol of balance, but a practical tool for understanding how everything in the universe was related. One of the key concepts in Pythagorean geometry was the golden ratio, a ratio found in nature, art, and architecture that creates a sense of perfect harmony and proportion. This ratio, often represented by the Greek letter phi, is approximately equal to 1.618, and it appears in everything from the spirals of seashells to the growth patterns of plants, to the proportions of the human body. Pythagoras believed that this ratio, along with other mathematical proportions, was the key to understanding the balance and beauty of the universe. Pythagoras also understood that geometry was not just a tool for intellectual understanding, but a path to spiritual awakening. To study geometry was to meditate on the divine order of things. Every angle, every line, every curve was a reflection of the deeper harmony that governed the cosmos. For the Pythagoreans, geometry was not just something to be studied in the abstract. It was something to be experienced. They believed that the practice of drawing, measuring, and contemplating geometric forms could bring the mind into alignment with the divine. To see the world through the lens of geometry was to see the world in its purest, most divine form, as a perfect and harmonious whole, woven together by the threads of numbers and proportions. Pythagoras' own life was a testament to this belief. His thoughts were not scattered, but organized and balanced, like the perfect forms he studied. He encouraged his followers to live their lives in the same way, to live with balance, discipline, and clarity of mind. By doing so, they could achieve harmony not only with the universe but also within themselves. Through geometry, Pythagoras believed, one could understand the fundamental truths of existence. He taught his disciples that the same geometric principles that govern the heavens also govern the soul. Just as the planets move in perfect orbits, so too could the human soul find its own orbit, its own balance, and its own harmony. In the stillness of his brotherhood, Pythagoras encouraged his followers to study geometry with reverence, to see each shape as a reflection of the divine. Through this practice, they could align themselves with the cosmic order, bringing their own lives into harmony with the greater whole. And so, in the quiet study halls of Croton, Pythagoras and his followers practiced their geometry, not just to understand the world, but to live in alignment with it. They believed that through this study, they could see beyond the surface of things, to the underlying beauty and balance that shaped all life. Every shape they drew, every proportion they measured, was a step closer to understanding the divine order of the cosmos. The geometry of life for Pythagoras was not just about lines and angles, but about understanding the deeper truth of existence, that all things are connected, that all things are part of the same divine pattern, and that by aligning ourselves with this pattern we can find peace, balance, and harmony within ourselves. Among the many teachings of Pythagoras, one of the most profound and transformative was the practice of silence. It was not simply the absence of sound, but a powerful discipline that allowed one to listen not only to the world around them but to the deeper, more subtle rhythms of existence. Pythagoras taught that silence was not a void, but a space where true wisdom could be heard. In the Brotherhood of Croton, silence was regarded as a sacred practice. It was said that one could not fully understand the harmony of the universe unless they had first learned to quiet the noise within. The Pythagoreans were not just scholars of geometry and music. They were also practitioners of a way of life that sought inner peace through stillness. At first, this silence was voluntary. Those who wished to join the Brotherhood were encouraged to take time each day to meditate in quiet solitude, reflecting on the teachings of Pythagoras and contemplating the mysteries of the cosmos. This practice was seen as a way of aligning the mind and spirit with the greater harmony of the universe. But Pythagoras soon realized that silence was not merely something that could be practiced during moments of reflection. It was a way of living, a means of transcending the distractions of the world and attuning oneself to the divine. And so, Pythagoras instituted a more formal discipline of silence within the Brotherhood. New disciples were required to remain silent for a period of time, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, before they were allowed to speak. This silence was not a punishment, but a purification, a way of preparing the mind to hear the deeper truths of the universe. In silence, the Pythagoreans were able to clear their minds of the clutter and chatter that often obscures true understanding. They learned to listen not only to the outer world but to their own hearts, to the rhythms and vibrations of the universe that spoke in the language of numbers, proportions, and harmony. The discipline of silence also taught them humility. In a world where words were often used to boast or argue, silence became a practice of restraint, a way of recognizing that there are times when words are unnecessary, and that true wisdom is often found in the quiet spaces between them. Pythagoras believed that the soul could only hear the voice of the divine when it was still, when it was free from the noise of the ego and the distractions of the world. During their years of silence, the disciples of Pythagoras were expected to observe everything with deep attention. They were to watch the movements of the stars, listen to the songs of birds, and reflect on the shapes and proportions of the natural world. Through this practice, they came to understand that silence was not a passive state but an active engagement with the universe. In the stillness, They learned to hear the music of the spheres, to feel the harmony of the cosmos, and to align themselves with the divine order that governed all things. The power of silence, Pythagoras taught, was not just in what was not said, but in the profound presence it created. In a world filled with noise, silence allowed for true communication to take place, not with words but with the soul. It was through silence that one could hear the whisper of wisdom, the gentle voice of the divine that spoke through the rhythm of the stars, the movement of the tides, and the beating of the heart. Pythagoras believed that silence was a key to understanding the nature of the soul. Just as the physical body must be disciplined and cared for, so too must the soul be trained and purified. Silence was a form of this purification, a way of quieting the desires and distractions of the lower self so that the higher self could be heard. In the stillness, the Pythagoreans were able to reflect on the deeper truths of existence. They meditated on the idea that all things are connected, that the universe is governed by principles of harmony and proportion. They contemplated the nature of the soul, the purpose of life, and the role of human beings in the grand symphony of the cosmos. But silence was not merely a means of intellectual understanding. It was also a way of embodying the divine harmony that Pythagoras taught. In silence, the disciples of Pythagoras learned to align their hearts and minds with the rhythms of the universe, to live in accordance with the divine order that governed all things. It was in this silent alignment that true wisdom and peace could be found. Pythagoras's emphasis on silence was not just about creating an atmosphere of quietude, but about cultivating an inner silence, a stillness of the mind and heart that allowed one to listen to the deeper truths of existence. He taught that in silence, one could hear the music of the spheres, the voice of the divine, and the wisdom of the cosmos itself. Pythagoras, whose thoughts were as vast as the universe itself, held a belief that was as profound as it was timeless: the transmigration of the soul. This idea, rooted in the ancient traditions of the East, was central to Pythagorean philosophy. He taught that the soul was eternal, never bound to one life but instead constantly cycling through different forms, reincarnating in a process of purification and progression. In Pythagoras's eyes, life was not a singular event, but a journey of the soul across time and space, from one life to the next, until it had been purified and returned to its divine source. The body, he believed, was but a temporary vessel for the soul, which was a divine spark of the cosmos itself, ever seeking to return to its true home. The belief in transmigration or metempsychosis was not merely an abstract idea for Pythagoras. It was a guiding principle that shaped how he viewed life, death, and the nature of the soul. He believed that each soul, after leaving the body, would enter into another life, taking on a new form, whether human, animal, or even plant, depending on the state of the soul's purification. This cycle of rebirth was a means by which the soul could learn, grow, and eventually attain the perfection it sought. The Pythagoreans held the idea of the immortality of the soul close to their hearts. They understood that life was a journey of self-discovery, and that the soul's journey through many lives was a path to wisdom, understanding, and ultimately to enlightenment. The soul was seen as a student in the great school of existence, each life a lesson, each lesson an opportunity for the soul to grow closer to its divine nature. To Pythagoras, the soul was never truly destroyed. Instead, it would pass from one life to another, continuing its journey toward understanding and ultimate harmony. In this way, death was not feared. It was merely a transition, a step on the path toward greater wisdom and greater unity with the cosmos. The soul would move from one body to another, discarding old forms, until it had been purified and could return to the divine source from which it came. The idea of transmigration also influenced the Pythagoreans' view of the natural world. They believed that all living beings were connected by the same divine spark, and that the soul could inhabit any form, whether it be human, animal, or plant. This belief led the Pythagoreans to treat all forms of life with reverence and respect, as they understood that the soul could be present in all things. This is why Pythagoras and his followers practiced vegetarianism, not only as a means of health but also as a way of honoring the sacredness of all life. They believed that killing animals would interfere with the natural cycle of the soul and hinder its path to purification. Pythagoras' teachings about the soul's journey also emphasized the importance of virtue and self-purification. The state of the soul in one life determined the nature of its next incarnation. A soul that had lived virtuously and with wisdom would be reborn into a higher form, while a soul that had lived in ignorance or vice would be reborn into a lower form. It was the task of the soul to purify itself through right action, meditation, and contemplation, so that it could rise to a higher state in the next life. This belief in the transmigration of the soul also had a profound impact on the Pythagoreans' understanding of death. They saw death not as an end, but as a transformation, a transition from one state of being to another. The Pythagoreans believed that at the moment of death, the soul would leave the body and enter into a new form, continuing its journey toward perfection. In this way, death was not feared, but accepted as part of the natural cycle of existence. Pythagoras' teachings about the soul and its journey through many lives offered his followers a sense of comfort and purpose. They understood that life was not random, nor was death an ending. Everything was part of a greater, eternal plan, a plan that sought to guide the soul back to its divine origin. And so, with this understanding, the Pythagoreans lived their lives with reverence, humility, and a deep sense of connection to the cosmos. In the quiet moments of their lives, they would meditate on the journey of the soul, understanding that their actions in this life would shape their next incarnation. They believed that by living virtuously in alignment with the divine harmony of the universe, they could help their souls on their path toward perfection. Each life was a step toward greater wisdom, greater peace, and greater unity with the divine. And so, the Pythagoreans lived not just for themselves, but for the soul's journey through eternity. They saw their lives as part of a greater cosmic process, one that transcended the limitations of time and space. In their hearts, they knew that the soul would continue its journey long after the body had passed away, always seeking the divine harmony that Pythagoras had taught them to recognize. In the teachings of Pythagoras, there was one virtue that stood out above all others: the importance of friendship. For Pythagoras, friendship was not merely a social contract or a passing bond. It was a sacred relationship, a reflection of the harmony of the universe itself. In his philosophy, friendship was the highest form of human connection, for it was grounded in mutual respect, trust, and the shared pursuit of wisdom. Pythagoras understood that the true nature of friendship could only be realized when two souls were in harmony, not only with each other, but with the greater order of the cosmos. Friendship, in his view, was an extension of the divine harmony that governed all things. Just as the stars moved in perfect time with one another, so too did true friends move in alignment, supporting and uplifting each other in their shared journey toward wisdom and enlightenment. In the Brotherhood of Croton, Pythagoras taught his disciples that the key to true friendship was not to seek personal gain, but to seek the highest good for both oneself and one's companions. Friendship, according to Pythagoras, was an act of mutual giving, not just of material goods but of wisdom, kindness, and understanding. A true friend was someone who supported you in your pursuit of virtue and helped you grow closer to the divine harmony of the universe. One of the core teachings of Pythagoras was the Golden Rule, the idea that one should treat others as one wishes to be treated. This principle of reciprocity and empathy was central to his philosophy of friendship. Pythagoras believed that the way to cultivate deep, meaningful relationships was to treat others with the same respect, compassion, and understanding that we wish to receive. By living according to this principle, one could create a community of harmony where every individual's actions were in alignment with the greater good. For Pythagoras, friendship was not limited to human relationships. He believed that all living things were connected by the same divine spark, and that true friendship extended to all forms of life. Just as one should treat others with kindness, so too should one show reverence and respect for the natural world and all its creatures. The Pythagoreans saw themselves as part of a larger, interconnected web of existence, where every soul, every plant, and every animal was a reflection of the divine harmony of the cosmos. This belief in the interconnectedness of all life led the Pythagoreans to practice compassion in their daily lives. They were known for their kindness and their commitment to living virtuously. They refrained from harming animals not out of fear, but out of respect for the divine order that connected all living beings. For them, every act of kindness was a reflection of the greater harmony that they sought to live in accordance with. Pythagoras' teachings on friendship and the Golden Rule also extended to his understanding of the self. He taught that in order to be a true friend to others, one must first be a friend to oneself. This meant cultivating inner peace, practicing self-discipline, and aligning oneself with the divine order of the universe. Only when one was in harmony with oneself could one truly be in harmony with others. This idea of self-harmony was central to Pythagoras' approach to living a virtuous life. He taught that wisdom and virtue were not external things to be acquired, but internal qualities to be cultivated. Through meditation, reflection, and self-discipline, the Pythagoreans sought to purify their souls, aligning themselves with the divine harmony of the cosmos. This inner peace and alignment with the greater order was the foundation of all true friendship. In the Brotherhood of Croton, friendship was also a means of mutual growth. Pythagoras believed that through genuine friendships, individuals could help one another grow spiritually, intellectually, and emotionally. By sharing wisdom, supporting each other's virtues, and holding each other accountable, friends could guide each other on the path of enlightenment. It was through these deep, meaningful relationships that the soul could find its true purpose and align itself with the divine. Pythagoras' philosophy of friendship was not a mere ideal, but a practical way of living. His disciples were encouraged to form strong, supportive bonds with one another, to treat each other with kindness and respect, and to always act in accordance with the Golden Rule. Through these practices, the Pythagoreans created a community built on love, wisdom, and the shared pursuit of truth. For Pythagoras, the harmony of the cosmos was reflected in the harmony of human relationships. Just as the planets moved in perfect synchrony, so too could human beings live in harmony with one another. Through friendship, the soul could find balance, and through balance, the soul could achieve unity with the divine. In his heart, Pythagoras believed that true friendship was the key to understanding the deeper truths of existence. For in friendship, we learn to love, to give, and to grow together, in perfect harmony as we seek the wisdom that lies beyond the surface of life. As with all great teachers, Pythagoras' journey was not one of smooth sailing. His teachings, grounded in silence, harmony, and the pursuit of wisdom, were deeply transformative. But transformation often brings with it resistance, and Pythagoras was no exception to this universal truth. His ideas challenged the status quo, and soon, opposition began to rise against him. In the bustling city of Croton, where Pythagoras had established his brotherhood, not everyone was receptive to his teachings. While his followers embraced his ideas and lived in accordance with his principles, there were others, those who clung to tradition or sought power in the old ways, who saw Pythagoras and his brotherhood as a threat. They viewed his teachings as disruptive to the social order, and they were not afraid to voice their displeasure. At first, this opposition took the form of criticism. Pythagoras' ideas about the immortality of the soul, the transmigration of souls, and the divine harmony that governed the universe were radical and difficult for many to understand. The idea that everything in the universe was connected by invisible threads, that numbers and proportions govern not only the heavens but the soul itself, was a philosophy that few were ready to accept. But soon this criticism grew louder and more intense. Jealousy, fear, and misunderstanding took root in the hearts of those who opposed Pythagoras, and what began as quiet skepticism blossomed into open hostility. Pythagoras' insistence on silence, discipline, and the pursuit of wisdom alienated many in the city, particularly those who found comfort in the noisy, competitive world of politics and power. They viewed his way of life, one of simplicity and reflection, as a challenge to their own worldly ambitions. As the brotherhood grew in influence, the opposition grew fiercer. Rumors spread about Pythagoras' practices, some of which were misrepresented or exaggerated. Some said that he was a tyrant, imposing strict rules on his followers, forcing them into silence and demanding absolute loyalty. Others spread word of his mysterious knowledge and the strange rituals that were practiced in the brotherhood. In the absence of understanding, fear and suspicion flourished. At times, Pythagoras himself was a target of personal attacks. He was ridiculed by those who thought him foolish or deluded, and his teachings were dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. The more the brotherhood thrived, the more the opposition took root in the city, and soon the tensions between the two factions reached a boiling point. Yet Pythagoras remained calm. In the face of this rising opposition, he did not respond with anger or force. Instead, he chose peace, understanding that the fire of opposition would eventually burn itself out. He knew that truth, when it is rooted in the divine harmony of the universe, cannot be extinguished by the flames of misunderstanding. In this way, Pythagoras embodied the very principles he taught, remaining steadfast in the face of adversity, refusing to be moved by the noise of the world around him. Pythagoras' response to opposition was not one of isolation or retreat, but of patient endurance. He continued to teach his disciples, continued to cultivate harmony within the brotherhood, and continued to live in alignment with the divine order, despite the growing resistance. He knew that the wisdom he had discovered was not his to hoard or keep hidden, but was meant to be shared with the world. He trusted that, in time, those who were ready would come to understand. Unfortunately, the opposition would not be so easily quelled. The tension between the brotherhood and the wider community reached a breaking point. Eventually, the brotherhood was forced to leave Croton, as the city became increasingly hostile to their way of life. Their teachings, once a light of wisdom in the city, were now seen as a threat to the established order. Though the brotherhood's physical presence in Croton was no longer, Pythagoras' legacy lived on, not in the buildings or the cities he had built, but in the hearts and minds of his disciples. The fire of opposition, though fierce, could not extinguish the light of wisdom that Pythagoras had brought to the world. His ideas, though misunderstood in his lifetime, would continue to resonate long after his departure. Pythagoras's response to the fire of opposition teaches us a profound lesson. True wisdom is not swayed by external forces. When we align ourselves with the deeper truths of the universe, we become anchored in a harmony that is unaffected by the tumult of the world around us. Opposition may arise, but wisdom rooted in peace and understanding will always endure. As the years passed, Pythagoras, like all mortals, grew older. His body, though strong and vibrant in his youth, began to show the marks of age. But his mind remained sharp, his spirit still as steady as the rhythms of the universe he so loved. In the quiet of his heart, he knew that his time was drawing near, yet there was no fear in him. He had long since come to understand that life was but a temporary sojourn, a journey of the soul that would continue long after the body had passed away. Pythagoras had lived his life in pursuit of wisdom, and now, as the end of his earthly journey approached, he sought not to resist the natural flow of time, but to embrace it with the same peace and grace that had guided his life. Just as the sun rises and sets with perfect harmony, so too did Pythagoras approach the final chapter of his life, knowing that death was not an end, but a transition. He gathered his closest disciples around him in his final days, and though his body grew weak, his words were as powerful as ever. Pythagoras spoke of the soul's journey, of the divine harmony that guided all things, and of the ultimate return to the source from which all life came. He reminded his followers that life was not about the accumulation of wealth or power, but about alignment with the eternal truths that govern the cosmos. As he lay upon his bed, surrounded by the quiet murmurs of his disciples, Pythagoras reflected on the life he had led, a life of simplicity, harmony, and wisdom. He had no regrets, for he had lived in accordance with the divine order, seeking always to listen, to understand, and to teach others the sacred rhythm that underlies all things. When the moment of his death finally came, it was as if the very universe paused for a brief moment. There was no fanfare, no dramatic event, only a quiet transition, as the soul of Pythagoras slipped from his earthly body and entered into the eternal harmony of the cosmos. His death was not a tragedy, but a continuation of the journey that had begun long before his birth. For those who had followed Pythagoras, his passing was not the end of his influence. It was the beginning of a new phase, a phase in which his teachings would continue to inspire and guide those who sought wisdom. His disciples carried his teachings forward, spreading his ideas throughout the Greek world and beyond, preserving his legacy for future generations. The final silence of Pythagoras was not a silence of emptiness, but of completion. It was the silence of a soul that had lived in perfect harmony with the universe, a soul that had returned to the source from which it came. In that silence, there was peace, there was understanding, and there was the eternal music of the spheres, the divine rhythm that Pythagoras had spent his life seeking to understand. As his disciples gathered to honor him, they did not mourn his passing, for they knew that the soul of Pythagoras had simply moved from one form to another, continuing its journey through the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. His teachings would live on in their hearts, in the harmony of their lives, and in the very rhythm of the cosmos. And so the story of Pythagoras ends, not with a dramatic conclusion, but with a soft, peaceful transition, a final silence that echoes with the wisdom of the ages. His life, like the stars he studied, would continue to shine, guiding those who sought truth and wisdom toward the divine harmony that governs all things. Though Pythagoras had passed from this world, the reverberations of his life and teachings continued to echo through the ages. His disciples, who had sat at his feet and absorbed his wisdom, now became the carriers of his light, spreading his ideas far and wide across the Greek world and beyond. They understood that Pythagoras had not simply taught them abstract concepts, but had opened their hearts and minds to the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. The Brotherhood of Croton, though it no longer existed in the same form, lived on in spirit. The teachings of Pythagoras found fertile ground in the cities and temples of the Greek world. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle would later draw upon the Pythagorean ideas, incorporating his beliefs into their own works, thus ensuring that his legacy would not fade with time. The golden ratio, the idea of numbers as the foundation of the cosmos, and the transmigration of the soul became integral to Western thought, passed down through the centuries, influencing not only philosophy but art, music, and science. Pythagoras's belief in the divine harmony of the universe found its way into the hearts of many. Artists and musicians, inspired by his teachings, sought to capture the beauty of the world not just in form, but in the rhythm of their creations. Composers, painters, and architects began to see their works as reflections of the divine proportions Pythagoras had taught. Even the mathematical principles he laid out continued to guide those who sought to understand the underlying order of the world. In the centuries that followed, his ideas would inspire thinkers from all corners of the world. The ancient wisdom of Pythagoras would influence not only Western philosophers but would also resonate with Eastern traditions, where similar ideas about the soul's journey and the cosmic harmony could be found. The universe as a grand symphony, a living organism of interconnected parts, would become a vision of the world that transcended cultures and ages. In later times, Pythagoras's ideas would influence some of the greatest minds in history. Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, would look to the mathematical order of the cosmos, much as Pythagoras had, seeing the universe as a grand machine that functioned according to divine laws. The golden ratio would continue to be studied and admired in both nature and human design, from the spirals of seashells to the works of Renaissance artists like Leonardo da Vinci. The idea of the soul's journey, too, would remain a potent force in spiritual and philosophical thought. While the details of Pythagoras's beliefs may have been modified or reinterpreted through time, the essence of his teachings, that the soul is eternal and constantly seeking alignment with the divine, would continue to resonate in the hearts of those who sought meaning beyond the material world. And so, the echo of his wisdom lives on, not as the memory of a man, but as the timeless expression of truth that continues to guide and inspire those who seek to understand the harmony that pervades the universe. Pythagoras's teachings remind us that we are all part of a greater whole, that every thought, every action, every moment of our lives is woven into the fabric of the cosmos. Even today, when we look at the stars, listen to the music of the world, or contemplate the mysteries of existence, we are in a sense hearing the same eternal song that Pythagoras heard all those years ago. The wisdom he left behind, in numbers, in music, in philosophy, continues to echo in the hearts of all who listen. And as long as we seek harmony and truth, his teachings will endure, forever guiding us toward the divine rhythm that unites us all. And so, we arrive at the final reflection, the last note of the song that Pythagoras began with his life and teachings. A song that reverberates not just in the heavens but within us all. Pythagoras's journey was one of seeking the divine harmony that unites all things, and in his wisdom he taught that the greatest discovery was not found in the stars or in the vastness of the cosmos, but within the very essence of the human soul. For the same rhythm that governs the universe, the same divine harmony that orchestrates the movements of the planets and the flow of the tides, also resides within each of us. Pythagoras believed that to truly understand the cosmos, one must first understand oneself. He taught that the soul is not separate from the universe but is intrinsically connected to the divine order. The same principles of balance, harmony, and proportion that govern the stars, the trees, the music of the spheres, and the geometry of life also govern the human heart. To find this harmony within oneself, Pythagoras encouraged his followers to live with discipline, to seek purity not just in their bodies but in their thoughts, in their words, and in their actions. Through meditation, reflection, and the study of nature and numbers, the Pythagoreans learned to align their souls with the rhythm of the universe. They understood that every thought, every decision, and every action was an expression of their inner harmony, or, conversely, of their discord. Pythagoras' teachings remind us that peace begins within. The outer world is full of noise, distractions, and challenges, but the quiet rhythm of the soul remains constant, waiting for us to attune ourselves to its perfect order. In our fast-paced lives, we may lose sight of this inner harmony, but it is always there within us, if we know how to listen. When we stop and listen, truly listen, to the silence between our thoughts, to the steady rhythm of our breath, we begin to feel that deep connection to the divine harmony that Pythagoras spoke of. It is not something outside of us, something to be found in distant lands or in the vastness of the sky. It is something already within, the harmony within. Just as a lyre, tuned to the correct proportions, produces beautiful music, so too can our lives produce harmony when we live in alignment with the deeper truths of the cosmos. The journey Pythagoras began is not just his own. It is the journey of all who seek to understand themselves, the world, and the divine. It is a journey that continues to this day, as each of us strives to find the harmony within ourselves and to live in accordance with the greater harmony that binds us all. In this final reflection, Pythagoras' life and teachings invite us to listen inward. It is in silence, in stillness, and in contemplation that we find the answers to the questions that have guided humanity for millennia. What is the nature of the universe? And what is our place in this great divine symphony? The answer lies within, in the quiet rhythm of our hearts, in the balance of our thoughts, in the proportion of our actions, and in the beauty of the connections we share with each other and with the world around us. As we close this chapter, let us remember that the teachings of Pythagoras are not just ancient wisdom, but living truths that continue to echo through the ages. They are not bound by time or space, for they are part of the eternal harmony that connects us all. Pythagoras' legacy is not in the words he spoke or the ideas he passed on, but in the way he invited each of us to find the harmony within. And so, as the night falls and silence settles around us, may we all listen to that eternal song, the music of the spheres, which plays within us, guiding us toward wisdom, balance, and peace.